Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
All right, gather round, groovy gang, gear up as we greet the great Gee Ranasinha. This gallant and good-hearted guru guides a glistening heart-led hustle. Great insights are guaranteed as Gee gallantly shares the gospel of his galactic business journey on the Heart-Led Business Show. So hold tight. It's going to be a genuine conversation. Hey, Gee, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tom. Delighted to be invited. And I never thought you'd get so many G's in that alliteration intro. Very well done.
Well, you know, the first question I always like to ask is, what's your definition of a heart-led business?
Okay. Well, a heart-led business, to me, is quite simple, really. It's a business that seeks to make a beneficial, an honest, valuable contribution to the lives of everyone it touches, whether that's clients, partners, or employees. And that's pretty much it. Short and to the point.
Yeah, short and sweet and very direct as well.
Yeah, and very direct. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what inspired you to start your heart-led business, and maybe in there, talk a little bit about what your business is.
Sure. Well, you know, we're a marketing agency that focuses on helping startups and small businesses. We work with organizations in about 20 countries, but primarily in the US. We're in a distributed working environment, so we're 19 people in 9 countries. 9 of us are in the US. The rest are in Europe, South Africa, and I have 2 people in Australia too. But to get back to the point, we're 16 years old. So if we cast our minds back to 2008, all those years ago, in terms of what inspired us, at the time there were 3 of us, there wasn't really a light bulb moment, an aha moment. There wasn't nothing there that particularly inspired me. I think it's always been the way that I've operated throughout my working life, right? You know, whether it was washing cars during school summer holidays when I was 14, or when I ran my first business as a advertising photographer working with brands such as Ford, Nestle, BAT, or Hilton Hotels, or indeed when I was the global CMO of a software company. We're working with companies like Apple, Time Inc., Airbus, or Marvel. You know, regardless, I've always come to the situation, whether it was a business situation or otherwise, to be honest, from an empathy perspective, you know, an empathy point of view. And, you know, clearly there's something there which people subconsciously or consciously pick up on, because, you know, there is something that happens, I'm sure it's chemically, right? When you find a like-minded person, okay? I'm not talking about soulmates and that sort of thing, but just people that you click with, that you know you're going to get on with. And it's always been like that. You know, it's a trite comment now because I've been saying it for 16 years. And the team will tell you that they're sick to death, sick to the back teeth of hearing it. But I always say that we don't have clients. We have friends that we do business with. And I think that's a key differentiator because we're very selective on who we take on, okay? Because we're a small agency, 19 people, right? So we can't take on everyone that we could do, because then we'd end up being a 159 person agency. And that's not what I want. That's not the goal of the organization at all. At the same time, everybody works on the same project. So we don't have like, you know, larger agencies that have like an A team to work on the key accounts, whatever that means, right? And then you have the B team that works with the guys who basically pay to keep the lights on, right? So we don't have an A team and a B team. We have a team.
I hope.
So, you know, consequently, we have to be quite selective in who we choose to work with. And part of that has been this, I won't call it something that we, you know, actively went for, but it's something that came out of the philosophy that I had with the company, which is the 3 rules that every new client needs to fulfill before we can take them on. And I mean, it's not something unique, Tom, I'll say straight away. Okay. At the end of the day, I ripped it off McKinsey. Okay. There was a guy from McKinsey by the name of Marvin Boer. He was the ex-managing director of McKinsey from about 1950 to sort of late 60s, but he stayed with, involved with the organization for years afterwards until he passed away anyway. And, he was considered like the father of modern management consulting. And by all accounts, he was an extremely principled and pragmatic person and insisted on extremely high, impeccable professional standards in substance, in ethics, in style throughout the entire organization of McKinsey. Okay. There's actually a story, I think it was in one of his biographies, that he strongly protested at being named by Business Week as one of the top business people in the 20th century, because as far as he was concerned, he was a professional rather than a businessman. Anyway, so McKinsey famously have these sort of core tenets of who they are and how they serve. And I sort of took that on board and sort of, gave it a little bit of a riff that works for our agency. And we have 3 rules, and they're very simple. Rule number 1, which is if we can't be as enthusiastic about your business as you are, then we won't accept you as a client. And that's simply because it's not a logical, rational, devoid of emotion type of relationship, right? There needs to be an emotional involvement into the why, what you're doing, why you're doing it, who you're, what change you're trying to make, within your customers, within your industry, within the world, whatever it may be. And we have to buy into that, because otherwise it's false. What we're doing is we're just going through the numbers. We're just, we're on cruise control. Yeah. And we can't give you the best work if we're doing that. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is that based upon what we call diagnosis, which is, basically looking at the business, what you're doing, how you're doing it, the budget available, your go-to-market strategies, your business philosophy, your P&L, all of that stuff. If at the end of that process, we feel that we can't make a meaningful difference over and above what you're already doing, we won't accept you as a client, because what's going to happen is it's all going to end in tears, right? There's going to be loads of finger pointing and life's too short. I don't want to go down that road, right? Yeah. If we don't believe we can move that needle, then why are we doing it? It's a bait and switch type operation. And that's, there's a reason if you Google me or you Google our organization, you won't find a bad word said against us, right? Because we talk the talk and walk the walk. So that's rule number 2. And rule number 3, which is sort of, let's say, inspired from McKinsey, is that if we feel that we would be too much of a drain on your finances, as the state of the business is today, we won't accept you as a client. The way that McKinsey phrase it is that the value to the firm has to be less than the benefit to the client. So there has to be a positive accumulation in value on behalf of the client, regardless of the numbers that we're talking about, whether it's a very small investment or whether it's, some huge multinational, multilingual, multi-channel extravaganza. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, marketing is there to move product, right? Yeah. We're here to sell stuff. I said stuff. Okay. I was going to say something else, but I changed it to stuff. Okay, that's what we're doing. Our job is growth. That's our job. And I think there's too many people who call themselves marketers. I don't call them marketers. I call them people who call themselves marketers.
I call them
right. Who get caught up in, vanity metrics and sort of ego numbers and, we're doing this and we're looking to make a change in the world and it's all about likes and comments and retweets and all that sort of stuff, which is all great and wonderful. But at the end of the day, we're doing this to shift product. So how has that made a tangible difference to the bottom line, right? What sales can you attribute to what you've just done compared to doing nothing? Because there needs to be a comparison as well. It's not just, we got 27 likes and we got 16 sales. Okay, but if we didn't do anything, would we have still got the 16 sales? Right. Or would we have got 15? Or would we have got 1? If the difference is between 16 and 15, the margin on that one sale, does that justify the expenditure of that particular campaign? Now, if you're selling something very expensive, large, complicated enterprise level B2B type environment that takes 6 months to deploy, yeah, then maybe it does. But if you're selling paper clips, maybe it doesn't.
I want to kind of focus in on those 3 rules as kind of that heart-led piece, because I think it really does make a difference when you are choosing who to work with and who's choosing to work with you as well. Because I'm sure there's been times where you've had to make a hard decision, whether it's like early in the startup phase of your business, where maybe cash was a little bit tight and you had a client that was like, oh, I really need to take this client, but I'm not sure if I can move the needle on them. Rule number 2, right? Make a difference in their bottom line. So talk to me about like how difficult that can be at sometimes and how you overcome that difficulty.
Every friggin' day, Tom, I'll tell you, okay? Firstly, I need to say one thing. We get a lot of inquiries for a small agency, because I've spoken with many small agency owners over the years. We get a ton of inquiries, in excess of 50 a week, sometimes almost 100 a week.
Wow.
Okay. And this is purely organic. It's not like we're not spending money on ads. Okay. This is people finding us from SEO, from podcasts, who knows, from various channels. Okay.
Definitely from this podcast.
And I will be snowed under. I've already got backup resources manning the phones for the instant that this podcast drops. Yeah. So I would say conservatively, we probably turn down 70% of the inquiries we get.
Wow. Based on the rules or based on other?
Based on the rules, but also, now this is where we get into potential PG territory. Okay. So warning you now.
Okay. I got my.
So get ready with a button.
Okay. Ready.
Okay. When we started the agency in 2008, there were 3 of us.
In the recession. Great time to start a business.
Yeah. Not a great time to start a marketing agency, I have to say. Not one of my best business decisions. I'll give you that. Right. But, we're still here.
You did something right.
So, it worked. But that was a following wind, stars in alignment. But mainly we had some absolutely superhero clients at the beginning who were absolutely phenomenal. But anyway, one of the rules that we had when we started the agency is that we were not going to work with You see, when you say in an English accent, that's less of an impact as opposed to having a North Atlantic accent. And I think I can get away with it.
Absolutely.
Right.
That should be rule number 1. You should have 4 rules.
Yeah.
The unspoken rule.
Well, yeah, but sometimes you have covert and sometimes you have people who are being, that's a word. I've just invented it. So I'm telling you this word.
Webster's.
Because they're coming from a position of uncertainty, fear, and doubt. Okay?
100%.
Because we're talking about stuff that they don't understand and they're trusting us with their newborn, right? So it's very easy in those sorts of circumstances to be an arsehole, a jerk.
Yeah.
But just to keep me humble, Tom, every so often an arsehole slips through the net and we end up working with them. And it keeps me humble and it sharpens the radar for next time round, but it's also a learning experience for everyone because, not only do we turn down 70% of the inquiries we get, which, as you can imagine, really cheers up my accountant, right? And really gives nightmares to my bank manager, right?
And your sales force too, probably.
Well, it's worse than that because even then, even when we get to the point of speaking with a potential client and going through their business, why they're doing it, their passion, to understand their passion about what they're doing within their business. Okay. Yes, I'm the person at the top of the tree, but I then need to sell the client to the team. It's not a given.
Oh, that's good.
And if there is pushback for, what would be considered reasonable reasons, ethical reasons, or, maybe whatever it may be, tobacco products or I don't know, whatever. Well, I mean, we've not had that come up, but that would be a possible example. Yeah, if there's not a majority consensus within the team, then I have to politely decline and have that dear John conversation with that potential client because it's all of us or none of us, right? It's a very flat organization. I'm totally in my team's hands because they are collectively, they're a bunch of magicians, Tom. I mean, I can say nothing more, right? They've bailed me out of holes more times than I can possibly remember.
Yeah.
Things where, because I'm one of those people who sort of knows a little about a lot of things. Okay. So I like to think I know about stuff, and I sort of get my hands under the hood and do stuff and break stuff because actually I don't know the implications of what I'm doing,
Yeah.
because I won't leave well alone, because I think, oh yeah, no, I don't need to bother anybody else. I can do that. It's a 5-minute job. Yeah. Crash, bang, boom. And all of a sudden it's something totally different. Or it may be we're working to an impossible deadline. Like we had 2 weeks ago, we were doing something for an organization based out of Ohio who was doing something in Europe, a very large trade show in Europe. And they set an impossible deadline, but we pulled it out of the bag. And it was a great success. And, there were pats on the back all around. And everybody was happy to do it because everybody was pulling in the right direction as to the reasons why they were doing it.
Now, talking about like the ones that slipped through though, like, have you had the opportunity to fire clients?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I fired one a month ago. It was a startup in the consulting category, and it was trying to work with these people. It was like trying to sort of swim through treacle. It was just impossible.
Yeah.
And things which should have taken a week or two were taking months.
And solve any of
yes, it was. It was a small organization. There were growing pains and all the rest of it. And it was one of those things where I said, yes, what we're doing here is something which is vitally important, but so are the 101 other things that we're doing every day, which are also vitally important. So it's like, well, okay, well, clearly it's a timing issue. Okay. You're trying to do too much at the same time, under-resourced, attention is focused on revenue rather than other things, all the rest of it. This is not going to work. Let's shake hands and part as friends, hopefully, restarting something down the road. But this wasn't something that I was prepared to put my team through for any longer. The whole project was supposed to be about 6 to 8 weeks. And we were getting to like 4 to 5 months, and we still couldn't even see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. That's a strain on the whole team then at that point. And there's
no, exactly. You see, the thing is, as you can probably appreciate, when you get work in, you get some client work, you book resources within the team so that we can comfortably get the work done to the level that we're all expecting it to be quality-wise. Right. And if that doesn't happen, then all of a sudden we're into the next block of time, which has been apportioned to a different client.
Yeah.
Like I said, we're a small agency, right? So, we can't pat our head and rub our stomach at the same time.
Right.
Right. So something has to give. And okay, especially when it's a new client. By a new client, I mean a client who's new to the marketing, or to working with the marketing agency.
Oh.
So they don't know what they don't know. So, there's client education that we need to sort of set expectations and all that sort of stuff. So we have to allow for all of that. And I am pessimistic with timeframes. I'd much rather underpromise and overdeliver, right? You'd be happier if we got this. If I told you it was going to take 6 weeks and I delivered in 4, then we all look like heroes, don't we? Right? You as well as us. So I try to do all of that. So I allow for a little bit of fat within that block of time that I'm booking for resource. But when it's like never ending, and it's not like I can charge for that, because that in my book unethical as well, because it just doesn't.
Well, and it violates, 2 of your rules as well. Can you make a difference? Well, no, because nothing's getting done. And 2, is it a drain on finances? Well, obviously, if you continue to work with something and no deliverable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And probably the first rule as well, you're not being enthusiastic, or they're not being enthusiastic. And so your enthusiasm has to drop to below what's standard. So that I love those rules because they can be really guiding principles in making heart-led decisions within the business. And I mean, I don't think I've heard that from any of my guests so far in terms of these are the clear rules that we have to be heart-led business owners to make sure that we're delivering a product or a service at a high level. I love that. That's a really good lesson, I think, for any heart-led business, is to find out what those rules are and for their own business.
And, I have to reiterate, this isn't something that we set out to do. We didn't set out to be a heart-led business. This is me, and at the time, 2 other colleagues, working the way that we think business should work. And it's as simple as that. And if it turns out to be heart-led, then so be it, you know? If I go back to my career path, back when I was a photographer, way back, you know, it was in days of film. That's how far back it was, okay? It was in days of 35mm medium format and 8x10, okay? Yeah. So how does Gee compete with the celebrities of that particular genre who knew the ad agencies and publishers by name, and nobody knows Gee? How did I do it? By being different, but not for the sake of being different, by being what we are now terming heart-led. Yeah. For example, when I used to do fashion shoot, everybody else used to schedule their fashion shoot at 8, 9, maybe 10 in the morning. Okay. Now, if you know anything about fashion models, you'll know they're certainly not their best at 8, 9, 10 in the morning.
Fair enough.
So Gee used to schedule his fashion shoots to start at 11 p.m.
Oh, wow.
11 p.m. was the golden hour. And we'd go on till 2, 3, sometimes 4 in the morning. And then, you know, these guys would go off clubbing and whatever else they wanted to do. You know, I'd collapse in a crumpled heap in the corner, but, you know, these guys would carry on. And so what happened? This spread, and account executives and art directors said, okay, this brief has just come in from this client. Who are we going to work with? I know, let's work with that guy, that new guy with a funny accent who wants to work in the middle of the night. Right? Because it's always a party when we go to Gee's place. It doesn't feel like work. Yeah. And it all culminated in, actually, when I was a CMO for this software company, I had to go to I think it was a publishing conference in New York. It was about 2002, 2003. That's how long ago it was. Yes, I am that old, Dom. What can I say? And one of the speakers at this conference was a guy called Tim Sanders, who at the time worked for Yahoo. Now I think he's some sort of bigwig at Harvard Business School or something. Anyway, he wrote this book called Love is the Killer App. Have you ever heard of that? Not. If you have
we'll
not,
link that up in the show.
I would strongly recommend you pick up a copy, okay? It's not a big read. You could easily do it in one sitting, okay? And it turns out that Tim had written a book about heart-led businesses. What is essentially what we're talking about now. Love being the killer app, right? If you remember, in the early 2000s, people were looking for the killer app,
that was,
as in, right, you know, the application which would make you buy into the platform.
And make $1 billion.
Right? And make $1 billion and lose the $1 billion like the next day.
Right.
3 or something.
The tech bubble.
Anyway, he wrote this book, Love is a Killer App, and he called the heart-led business proponent, he called them love cat.
Interesting.
Okay, to be a love cat. And it is primarily what we're talking about. It is leading with love, leading with empathy, putting yourselves in the shoes of others and doing stuff that would make sense. So a love cat is primarily what we're talking about, a proponent of a heart-led business.
Yeah.
It's about empathy. It's about respect. It's about ethics, about love, right? A heart-led business. Yeah. So pick up a copy of the book. So I had unbeknowingly been practicing what Tim was preaching all of these years from that book.
Well, it totally makes sense. Like everybody talks about, you know, fall in love with your product, fall in love with your customers, fall in love with the process. And it makes business decisions better when you have that level of enthusiasm or, you know, love for something. You know, it's better than like, and it's definitely better than hate. And, you know, how would you contrast that with maybe in your career where you've worked for a corporation that is completely profit driven? What do you see as the difference between those two?
I think it's a very good question. In our industry, there are a number of agencies which try to do the whole thing by remote control and try to sort of copy and paste predetermined recipes and impose them on a client with a view to maximizing client project, the profit on that particular project. And it usually gets them over a couple of hurdles before they come to a grinding halt, because it's especially true with a discipline such as marketing, because marketing is not a wholly logical, rational core tenet of business. If you look at other areas of business, right, if you look at sales, if you look at manufacturing, okay, All of these things are based on logic and pragmatism, and it's sort of quasi-Newtonian in their outlook, okay? 2 plus 2 is always 4.
Yeah.
And it can't be anything else. And like in manufacturing, if, from an efficiency-based perspective, if you're making widget, then you could increase the productivity of your manufacturing process by either sourcing cheaper raw materials or finding efficiencies within the widget making process to the point where you're lowering input and getting the same or a greater output, right? Efficiency, right? Mechanical advantage, call it what you want. But this presupposes, like most things economics, it presupposes that you have 100% complete information, utility, and trust within that system. And in marketing, you don't. For a number of reasons. Number one, the target of our effort are not logical, rational, contextually independent entities. We're dealing with human beings, and human beings are anything but rational. Right? We are not rational.
We're emotional.
Right. There's a famous anthropologist called Jill Bolt Taylor. Okay. And she wrote something in one of her books way back when, which has always stuck with me. And it's yet another quote that I tend to gobble up. But what she says I think is very true, is that we think we are thinking beings that feel, when in actual fact, we are feeling beings that think.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything you're buying, apart from commodities, but otherwise, whatever it is you're buying, whatever product, whatever service, whether it's B2B, whether it's B2C, whatever it is, we buy from the heart. We buy emotionally.
100%.
And we then post-rationalize logically. Yep. We tell ourselves a story. We buy something, probably for something that was too expensive. Yeah. And then we get it home. And what happens? We tell ourselves a story. Oh, yeah, but, yes, it was expensive. But to tell you what, look at the quality. It's going to last a lot longer than if I bought some cheap crap. Or look how the workmanship is. This is handmade. This is not some factory rubbish. We'll tell ourselves some BS story to justify that purchase. But that initial purchase has been made emotionally. And that is the job of marketing, to invoke an emotional reaction, hopefully a positive emotional reaction. And that's why the whole thing breaks down when we start trying to compare marketing to other areas of the business, right? Because if you're talking about manufacturing and widgets, like I was mentioning earlier on, every part of that manufacturing process can be measured using units which are universally understood and translatable.
And you can put a cost or a bit to each one of those. And whereas marketing...
Right. We can talk about like electrical watts or kilograms or pounds or whatever, right? Everything can be categorized. But if we look at some of the influences to making a decision to purchase something, some of those factors do not have universally exchangeable units. That, for instance, there's no such thing as a SI unit of fear or trust or anger, right? But these are all things which influence a buying purchase. And so by trying to create efficiencies within a marketing system, systems thinking, right? You try to optimize each part, the whole thing breaks down, which is where we've got to today, where 99% of the marketing that we see is absolute junk, which is instantly ignored, but is cheap. So people think it's a good value.
Right. Or they slap it together or what have you. I think that's a really great point. And it's applicable, I think, to a lot of heart-led businesses that whether it is manufacturing or marketing, there's always those elements that cannot be, efficiently or measured in an efficiency. And if you try to, you're taking that spirit and that love out of it as well.
It breaks down. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point that you're making there. We've actually come to our time, and I don't want to run on too long here, Gee, but this fascinating conversation, especially the marketing piece, and that you can't compare marketing to manufacturing as well, and all that. I love that, as well as the 3 rules that you shared earlier. So if people are interested in learning more about you and your business, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
They should all go to hell. No, of course, no. The easiest way to get hold of me is through LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Amazingly, Tom, there is only one Gee Ranasinha on LinkedIn.
That's amazing. That makes it pretty easy.
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn and let's have a conversation. Talk is free.
Yeah.
And If it turns out that we work together, great. But if it turns out that I can push you in a particular direction that helps you and I've got no skin in the game, that works too. Because the point is that we need to have each other's backs, right? That's another part of the heart-led business, surely, right?
Elevate everybody.
We're all on the same side here, right? Rising tide lifts all boats and all that
Love
stuff.
it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your words of wisdom with us as well. I certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
I appreciate the invite, to be honest, Tom. It was absolutely delightful. We should do a part 2.
Awesome. And to our show fans, thank you so much for listening or watching the show today. I really appreciate it. And I know Gee really appreciates it as well. So make sure you're checking out the show notes. We're going to link up all of that Gee was talking about, as well as his LinkedIn profile down there in the show notes. Check that out and have a conversation with him. I know all of our show guests really like that when listeners do reach out. And so until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.